Hello? My name's Marisol, and I survived a flight I was never meant to walk off of. It wasn't the altitude that nearly killed me. It was my own sister. Midway through the flight, my chest tightened, my breathing turned shallow, and as I reached for my inhaler, she ripped it from my hand and shouted to the entire cabin, "She's on street drugs!" That lie, simple, cruel, wasn't just made to hurt me. It was rehearsed, because for years she'd been rewriting my life in whispers behind closed doors. And now, everyone finally heard it. But why would someone go that far? Just to keep their little sister from being seen. I arrived at the gate a few minutes earlier than I needed to. The boarding area was already filling with quiet chatter and the occasional overhead call for final passengers. Phoenix's morning sun poured through the massive glass windows, warming the stiff airport seats and casting long shadows on the tile floor. I chose a seat near the corner, far from the center crowd. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, not today. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder bag, double-checked my boarding pass for the fourth time, and sipped from a lukewarm bottle of water I didn't remember buying. I kept my breathing steady, calm, predictable. Then I heard the click of heels. Vera always made an entrance. Today was no different. She strutted in like she owned the terminal, head high, scarf perfectly knotted at her collarbone, those sunglasses that only she could wear indoors without raising eyebrows. "Well, well," she said as she stopped in front of me, removing her shades like a Hollywood starlet. "Look at you. First class, huh?" Her lips curved into a smirk, not a smile. I didn't look up right away. I forced my voice to stay level. "Morning, Vera." She leaned in, her voice lower. "New bag. Looks retail. What was it, first paycheck from that little clinic of yours?" That one stung more than I let show. "It was a gift." "From who?" "Your doctor boss with the wedding ring tan?" I said nothing. I wasn't about to let her goad me before we even boarded. But I could already feel the shift, the subtle tilt in power that she always brought with her, like walking into a room and turning off the oxygen. The gate agent called our boarding group. I stood, quietly collecting my things, and walked to the queue. Vera followed close behind, her tone loud enough now for others to hear. "First class," she said, dragging the syllables out like they were some foreign concept. "Look at you, moving on up. Must be that insurance settlement you pocketed." A man in front of us glanced over. Vera smiled, like she'd just made an innocent joke. I stayed silent, eyes on the carpet. My palms were already damp, my lungs slightly tight, not from illness yet, just the pressure of being in her proximity. Once seated, I tucked myself into 2C and placed my bag beneath the seat. I reached for my inhaler, habit more than need, and held it loosely in my hand. My breathing was fine. But I'd learned over the years that being around Vera required preparation. She dropped into the seat beside me. "You know, people talk, especially in families. They say you've been playing the sympathy card for years." I didn't respond. "You want to know what Mom told me before she passed? Marisol has always been good at pretending to be weaker than she is. Her words, not mine." That wasn't true, at all, and she knew it. But she also knew I wouldn't argue. Not here, not in public. Not with strangers within earshot who might nod in agreement without knowing the backstory. The plane began to taxi. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. This was just a flight, less than 2 hours. I could survive 2 hours. 30 minutes into the air, the pressure changed. The familiar tightness began curling inside my chest. It wasn't sudden, but it was sharp, like an invisible belt tightening from the inside. I reached into my bag with one hand, trying to keep my movements calm. Vera leaned over. "You're not doing this now," she whispered, her tone icy. "You're not going to make a scene and pull the whole asthma act like last Thanksgiving." I pulled out the inhaler and pressed the cap. She moved faster than I thought she could. One swift motion, and it was gone, yanked from my hand, held high like she'd found something illegal. "Enough of this junk already!" she hissed. I gasped. I tried to reach for it, but she shifted in her seat, blocking me with her arm. A flight attendant passed by. Vera raised her voice just slightly, enough to get attention but not alarm. "She's fine. just panicking herself. I've got it under control. The attendant looked at her, then me. My hands were shaking now, chest rising too fast, too shallow. I tried to speak, but my throat was closing in. The woman turned to Vera again. Is she with you? Vera nodded. My sister. She gets like this when she doesn't eat. It's behavioral. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My lungs wouldn't let me. I pointed to my wrist, the medic alert bracelet I never took off, the one Mom made sure I wore since I was 8. The attendant's eyes barely flicked toward it. I'll grab water, she said before disappearing down the aisle. I tried to grab my phone, but my vision was blurring at the edges. Vera leaned in again, voice low. You brought this on yourself, trying to play the victim. But you're not walking off this flight with everyone thinking you're a hero. Not this time. That's when it happened. She stood up, turned to the flight crew and the nearest rows, raised her voice with theatrical precision. She's on street drugs! The cabin went silent. Heads turned, phones came out. Someone gasped. A passenger across the aisle murmured, Is she ODing? I felt the stares on my skin, hot, suffocating, but nothing hurt more than the satisfaction in Vera's voice. Calm, collected, as if she was doing everyone a favor. I clawed for breath, for truth. For someone to look at me and see a person instead of a problem. But all I saw was Vera, holding my inhaler like evidence in a trial I hadn't agreed to. People didn't move. Not right away. It was as if her voice had stunned the entire plane into a momentary stillness, like someone had unplugged the hum of routine and tossed the cabin into a vacuum. I could hear the faint click of a camera app. A soft, Jesus Christ, from the row across. My lungs were begging for air, but my mind was spiraling faster. She's on street drugs! Vera's words hung in the air like smoke, thick and inescapable. They echoed in my ears even though she'd only said them once. I could feel everyone's eyes crawling over me, looking for signs of collapse or guilt or whatever image her accusation was building in their minds. I was still fighting for breath when the flight attendant rushed over, not to me, but to Vera. Ma'am, are you okay? She asked her. Not me, the one wheezing. The one folded over and gripping the armrest like it could ground me from drowning in air that wouldn't enter my lungs. Vera responded like she was annoyed, not concerned. She started acting erratic. Pulled this out, she said, waving my inhaler like it was a stolen weapon. I don't think that's even prescribed. The attendant's eyes flicked to the device, then to me, then back to Vera. You're her? Sister? Vera said quickly, stepping forward. She has issues. We've been dealing with this for years. You know how it is. No, they didn't know how it was. Because if they had, someone would have asked me, not her. But no one did. I reached for my wrist, tugging up my sleeve with trembling fingers. My medical bracelet gleamed under the cabin lights. Engraved, as always, Marisol Kerner, severe asthma, albuterol rescue. I held it up. She's just anxious, Vera told them. It happens when she feels cornered. That's when the second flight attendant showed up, this one a little older, her expression more clinical. She looked at the inhaler Vera was still holding. We need to verify this isn't a prohibited item, she said. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't kind either. She didn't look at me when she said it. She reached over and took it out of Vera's hand, glanced at the label, then frowned. It's hers, I managed to wheeze. It's mine. The older woman turned to me finally. Your family already confirmed it's not prescribed. I blinked, stunned. What? Your sister said you don't have a prescription, and she's traveling with you. She's lying, I gasped. But I could already feel the shift, not just in my chest, but in the mood around me. Trust had been handed off to someone with a calm voice and clean blouse. I had none of that. All I had was panic, and now, apparently, a reputation. They took my inhaler to the galley. The panic built quicker after that. No one was yelling anymore, which somehow made it worse. My hands trembled so violently I couldn't hold my phone. I tried to pull up the email with my digital prescription copy, but the screen blurred under my tears, and I couldn't keep my thumb steady. I returned to my seat because I didn't know where else to go. I sat there, breathing through clenched teeth, eyes fixed on the back of the seat in front of me. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free from my ribs. The man across the aisle kept peeking over, concern flickering in his eyes, but he didn't speak. The woman beside him pulled her daughter closer, whispering something I couldn't hear. The little girl stared at me, wide-eyed. Even the air felt judgmental. I felt like I was shrinking. I wanted to disappear into the floor and never have to come back up. Everything inside me screamed for justice, for someone to stand up and say, "Wait, something doesn't add up here." But no one did. Not yet. I was on my own. I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to rest, but because I had to shut it all out before it devoured me whole. That's when the voice came back. Not Vera's. Not this time. Another voice, layered beneath the fog of my panic, clearer than anything I'd heard all flight. "You always take things that don't belong to you." I knew that voice. It belonged to my 11-year-old self's nightmare. Suddenly, I wasn't on a plane anymore. I was in Aunt Lucy's den. Summer. The heat sticking to my skin. The television blaring cartoons in the background. I was staring at a $20 bill on the coffee table, money that wasn't mine and never tempted me. But it vanished minutes later, and Vera was already in the kitchen telling Aunt Lucy that she'd seen me shoving something in my pocket. I'd denied it, confused and tearful. Aunt Lucy didn't yell, but she didn't believe me either. She just asked me to go sit outside until dinner. Vera sat in the cool of the living room, sipping soda and watching her show while I waited on the porch with red cheeks and a stomach twisted in shame. Back on the plane, I opened my eyes. That same acid guilt returned, curdled with age and repetition. "She's always been a thief." That's what Vera had said when she leaned in just before yelling to the crew. Not loud enough for others to hear, just enough for me. Enough to sink me back into the version of myself she liked best. Helpless, voiceless, guilty without cause. But I wasn't 11 anymore. I sat up straighter. My breath still rasped, but it was enough. I would make it enough. Because I knew the truth now, clearer than ever. She didn't want me weak because I was weak. She needed me to be weak so she could stay in control. And if that meant letting me suffocate in front of strangers to protect her image, she would do it again. That whisper, curled at the edge of my mind like smoke, had never really left me. It lived in the silent spaces of family dinners and birthday calls I wasn't included in. It echoed through the years every time someone in the family joked that I was dramatic, that I took things too personally, that I was sensitive. The truth was, I had been conditioned to remain quiet, because every time I tried to speak, someone louder rewrote the story, and no one was louder than Vera. I pressed my forehead against the cool window of the plane, letting my eyes blur with the clouds outside. My throat was still raw from wheezing, but I'd regained some control of my breathing. Barely. The recycled air inside the cabin felt stale, judgmental even, like it had already chosen a side. My body was rigid, stiff from trying not to take up space, from trying to disappear without vanishing. The memory came sharper this time, not just the image of that summer day at Aunt Lucy's house, but the details I had tried to forget. I had been 11. Vera was a teenager, full of her usual charm with the adults and venom with me. I remember the feeling of the fan barely cooling the sticky heat inside the living room, cartoons buzzing in the background. Aunt Lucy had gone into the kitchen to prepare lunch. The $20 bill sat on the coffee table next to a stack of unopened mail. I didn't touch it. I hadn't even looked at it for more than a second. But when Aunt Lucy came back and noticed it missing, Vera's voice had been swift, calm, confident. She had her hand near it when I left. Maybe she thought no one would notice. No anger, just cold suggestion. And that was all it took. I'd been sent to sit outside on the porch with a glass of water. No punishment, not really. But it was the look in Aunt Lucy's eyes that seared itself into me. That quiet disappointment. The silent withdrawal of trust. It had been years before I realized that wasn't the only time Vera had done something like that. Just the first time I noticed. Now, seated on a plane thousands of feet in the air, accused of something worse by the same sister who had stolen my truth more times than I could count, I understood something clearly. Vera didn't just lie to protect herself. She lied to control the narrative. And when people believed her, it was because she made it easy. She looked composed. She sounded reasonable. And I, still that quiet little sister, looked like the problem. A vibration buzzed against my thigh. My phone, still lodged halfway in the pocket of my seat. Luisa, Tia, read the screen. I didn't answer. My hands were trembling too much to unlock it, but seeing her name alone sent a quiet ache through my chest. Tia Luisa had always watched us from the edges of family gatherings. She never took sides, but she saw things. A few years ago, she'd pulled me aside during my mom's birthday party, after Vera had left in one of her huffs. She'd whispered, "Your mom knew, Marisol." She saw what Vera did, she just didn't know how to stop her. I remember standing there, stunned. It was the first time anyone in the family had acknowledged, even indirectly, that I wasn't imagining it, that maybe I hadn't been the difficult one all along. And then Mom got sick. Fast, aggressive, the kind of diagnosis that doesn't leave room for unfinished business. After she passed, Vera had stepped into the matriarch role like it had been waiting for her, arranged the funeral, sent out the estate documents, handled the lawyers. I had been grieving. She had been reorganizing. The phone stopped vibrating. I slipped it back into my bag. The overhead lights dimmed as the flight prepared to descend into its last phase before landing. A subtle shift in the atmosphere told everyone to settle down, return trays, return to their designated places. I didn't have one. I glanced down at the floor near my feet and noticed my carry-on had shifted slightly under the seat during the commotion. I leaned forward slowly, my chest still tight, and pulled it up into my lap. The outer pocket was zipped, but I knew what was inside. I hadn't planned to read it on the plane. I'd brought it because it felt wrong to leave behind. I needed something tangible, something that reminded me I had not imagined my life, my pain, or my place in this family. The envelope was thick and labeled in my mother's handwriting. Medical records, do not discard. My heart picked up speed as I slipped my fingers under the flap and slowly peeled it open. Inside were neatly folded pages, some still clipped together with the tiny gold paper clips Mom always used for important documents. I recognized prescriptions, scanned letters from doctors, even an old emergency room intake form with my name scribbled in shaky handwriting, my mother's, from the night I'd nearly stopped breathing in college. Beneath those papers, something else, a notarized document with the state seal. At the top, Advance Healthcare Directive and Medical Power of Attorney. My name was on it, my mother's signature, dated and confirmed. I flipped to the third page, Vera's name. She agreed to file it, I whispered to myself. It came back to me now, like a Polaroid developing in real time. Mom had told me in the hospital, voice thin but firm. Don't worry about this paperwork, Marisol. Vera said she'd take care of it. You just rest. I had trusted that, and Vera had lied. She hadn't filed anything. She hadn't informed anyone. And now, she had stood on a plane in front of dozens of strangers and painted me as a threat, knowing full well that I had the legal right to manage my own medical treatment, and that she had buried that truth under her performance. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my face, not from panic this time, but from something else. Resolve. I folded the papers carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and returned the envelope to my bag. Then I zipped it shut, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't over. And when we landed, I wasn't just going to walk off that plane. I was going to walk into a confrontation that had been building since childhood, and this time, I would not be silent. The paper felt heavier now that I knew what it represented. I didn't dare look around the cabin. I didn't want to see the stairs or catch another glance of someone trying to record me through the crack in their seat back. I kept my body angled toward the window, shielding the documents with my coat, and laid them carefully across my tray table. The turbulence had started picking up again. Nothing dramatic yet, just the kind that reminded you weren't grounded, that you were floating in a metal tube thousands of feet above a world that would keep spinning with or without your crisis. I unfolded one page at a time. Most of it was standard medical paperwork, prescriptions, ER forms, printouts from asthma specialists over the years. But as I got to the second clipped packet, my breath caught. This time not from illness, but from recognition. There it was, on the top right corner of the page, in neat legal print. Medical Coordinator, Vera Aldridge. And below it, my name, my records, my rights. Everything clicked. Every doubt I'd tried to smother for months exploded into clarity. Mom hadn't just trusted Vera to file these documents. She had made her responsible for managing them, and Vera had accepted. She had nodded her head at the hospital, pretended to be helpful, and promised to handle it. Meanwhile, she was planning how to control the narrative all over again. A paper clipped to the back of the form was creased at the corner. It looked as if it had been folded, then unfolded hastily, perhaps by someone who had hesitated before hiding it away. I smoothed it out. A note in my mother's handwriting. Marisol, keep this with you. If anything ever happens and I can't speak, this says you can. My throat tightened. I hadn't remembered this note when I packed. I hadn't even known it was in here. But now it felt like Mom had reached through the silence, through the years of being erased, and given me back my voice. The plane rocked slightly. A steward's voice crackled over the intercom, asking everyone to return to their seats. I gathered the pages, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it securely into the zippered compartment of my purse. Then I reached for my wallet to double-check something I hadn't looked at in weeks. My insurance card. It wasn't there. I blinked. I opened every fold in my wallet, checked every crevice. No card. Instead, I found another card from the same company. Same logo, same color scheme. But this one was expired, and the name on it, Melissa K. Andrews. Not me, not even close. I sat there stunned for a moment, staring at the wrong card like it might change if I looked at it long enough. Then it hit me. Vera had access to my bag at the terminal. She had insisted on helping me reorganize my things after TSA. She had made some offhand comment about how cluttered my purse always was. "Let me help you," she'd said. "You're going to lose something important in this black hole." That's when she did it. She slipped out my card. She planted another. She sabotaged my proof of treatment and created enough doubt to make herself look like the trustworthy one when I inevitably collapsed under pressure. I gripped the seat arm with one hand and my purse with the other. My head was buzzing. Not from anxiety this time, but from rage wrapped in precision. Cold, deliberate betrayal wasn't an accident. It was a tactic. She didn't just want to silence me. She wanted to make sure I couldn't prove myself even if I tried. The aisle was clear now. Most passengers had settled down after the earlier drama. The air was calmer, on the surface. I stood up slowly, knees stiff, and stepped into the aisle. Vera was seated 2 rows up in first, leaning back with her arms folded and an expression like she was ready to win another round. When she saw me approach, her eyebrow arched. "Did you come to thank me for stopping your little scene?" she said quietly, still smiling. "No," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I came to tell you I remember everything." Her smile twitched. "Everything? Mom asking you to file my medical directive. You said you did. You didn't. Maybe it got lost." "No. You buried it, like you always do when something doesn't fit your story." Vera's smile widened, but there was something brittle behind her eyes now. "And what are you going to do with that memory, little sister? Cry to the flight crew? Hand out printouts?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said simply. "And when they ask who lied, I'll have papers. You'll have performance." Vera snorted under her breath. "God, you're dramatic. I was trying to help you." I leaned in slightly, careful not to draw attention. "If you push this 1 more inch, I will make sure they know what you did. And this time, I won't let you rewrite it." Her voice was low, syrupy. What did I do, exactly? Be the responsible one again? I took a step back. "You stole my oxygen, Vera. Literally. But the thing you never understood is, I've always found a way to breathe without your permission." I walked back to my seat without waiting for a response. The plane dipped slightly. A soft chime indicated our descent would begin soon. I could hear the rustle of people buckling up, settling in. I pulled the notarized document from the envelope and held it in my lap. I let my fingertips trace the embossed seal, the printed legal confirmation of what I had been trying to assert since the moment this flight started. I whispered it aloud, not to anyone, just to myself. I am the legal beneficiary. And this time, I didn't need Vera's approval to believe it. I didn't tuck the document away right away. I held it in my hands, my thumb brushing over the embossed seal like it might disappear if I didn't keep touching it. It wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was proof of who I was, of who she wasn't. The turbulence shifted again, a subtle drop that reminded the entire cabin we were still airborne, still vulnerable. But inside me, something had settled. Not peace exactly, but certainty. For the first time since we took off, I wasn't fighting to breathe out of panic. I was breathing because I had something real in my hands, something they couldn't twist. Vera was leaned back in her seat 2 rows ahead, legs crossed, one hand loosely holding her phone as she scrolled through something with the smug serenity of someone who thought they had already won. She hadn't noticed me standing behind her yet. Good. I walked quietly toward her row, paused beside her seat, and without asking permission, said low and clear, "This paper proves you're not the one Mom trusted." She didn't flinch right away. Her gaze remained on her screen for a second longer before she looked up at me, amused. "Oh, sweetie, still clinging to scraps?" She said it like I was a child waving around a crayon drawing, not a legal document with her name stamped in black and white, beside responsibilities she had never fulfilled. I didn't answer. I turned and headed toward the back of the cabin, knowing she would follow. She liked an audience too much not to. As I made my way down the aisle, I passed Sarah, the younger flight attendant. She gave me a subtle nod as I passed her cart. Her expression was unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes, something I hadn't seen from anyone on this flight since it began: solidarity. When I reached the galley near the rear exit, I stood with my back to the wall, trying to regulate my breathing. I could hear Vera's voice behind me, floating up in casual conversation with the flight supervisor. She was doing that thing again, performing concern. It's been a tough couple years. After Mom passed, she never really recovered, poor thing. She gets confused sometimes, thinks people are out to get her. I turned back down the aisle and walked steadily toward her. She saw me this time, so did half the passengers. "Is this going to be another scene?" she asked, fake concern in her voice. I stopped beside her seat, raised the notarized document above my shoulder, and spoke loudly enough for the rows around us to hear. "You told them I was unstable," I said. "You told them I was on drugs. But I have a notarized advance directive stating that I have full legal authority over my medical care. You were supposed to file it." "You didn't." The words came out steady, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the cabin. Vera stood up slowly. "You're embarrassing yourself." "You embarrassed me," I replied. "You lied, just like you always do. And this time, you put my life at risk." A few passengers leaned forward. Phones were visible in hands now. The moment was no longer private. Vera stepped closer. "You're always going to be the weak one. That's your role. It's who you are. You think waving that paper around is going to undo all the years of you being a mess?" "No," I said, breathing evenly. "But it's going to make them remember who I am, beyond the version you created." A voice behind me whispered, "Damn right." I turned my head just slightly. Sarah had moved closer. She was holding a folded slip of paper in her palm. She stepped up and gently passed it to me, as if she were just handing off a receipt. Her voice was low but unmistakable. "Cabin footage is saved," she said. "If you need help later, I saw everything." I took the paper, squeezing it just slightly, not because I needed it to breathe, but because it reminded me I wasn't entirely alone in this. "I appreciate that," I whispered back. Vera saw the exchange. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to being interrupted by allies she hadn't accounted for. I sat down again, heart thumping, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing my ground after a lifetime of not doing so. Sarah moved down the aisle as if nothing had happened. Vera lingered near the galley, speaking with the supervisor, still trying to paint herself as the voice of reason in a storm of family drama. But her tone had changed. It lacked conviction now, like she was playing a role she wasn't quite sure how to finish. I stared down at the document again, not for validation, I didn't need to see it anymore, but because I wanted it to be the last thing I looked at before I stood up again. Because I wasn't done. And then, almost too perfectly, my phone buzzed against the side of my seat. It had slipped out earlier, during the worst of the confrontation. Now, its screen was lit. A voicemail. From Mom. My fingers moved before I could even think. I tapped play, expecting a short, automated message, but instead, her voice filled the space between my ears, wrapped around me like memory. Marisol, if anything ever goes wrong, I need you to listen to me. Don't let Vera speak for you. You are the one I trust. You always have been. I love you. And you can do this. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. The volume hadn't been low. People had heard. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see Vera's face. It started playing before I even realized my finger had tapped the screen. My phone, still lying near my feet, had somehow survived all the chaos, the shaking, and the arguments. And now, it had betrayed Vera in the most poetic way imaginable. My mother's voice, clear, deliberate, and heartbreakingly firm, floated into the cabin air like it had never left her throat. If anything happens, she said, her voice already thin with illness, I need them to know Marisol is the one I trust. She gets everything. Not Vera. She lied. No one said a word. The low drone of the engines continued, and a baby a few rows back let out a whimper, but everything else had frozen. You could feel the silence settle, not out of confusion, but out of recognition, the kind of stillness that falls when a lie collapses in real time. I looked up. All around me, faces were turning. Some were wide-eyed, some confused. Others, mostly older passengers, looked like they knew exactly what had just happened. The kind of truth that had been long buried had just been resurrected at 35,000 feet. Vera didn't say anything right away. Her expression changed, but not the way I expected. It wasn't rage, not even denial. It was fear, because she realized, finally, that this wasn't just about me and her anymore. This was public. This was real. And someone else, Mom, had spoken louder than both of us, from beyond the grave. A few rows ahead, a middle-aged woman pulled out her phone. I saw her thumb tap the screen. Recording. Behind me, someone muttered, "You hear that?" That was her mother. I bent down, picked up my phone gently, and held it to my chest. My hands were trembling again, but not out of panic this time. It was adrenaline. Something powerful and ancient and full of fire had been ignited. And I wasn't alone. That realization hit me just as a hand reached across the aisle. It was a man in his 60s, clean cut, dressed in a navy blazer. "You need anything?" he asked quietly. "Water? A medic?" I shook my head, eyes still locked on Vera. "Let me help you," he said, this time to the flight attendant who was walking toward me with cautious steps. "I'm okay," I replied. "But I need someone to help me grab something from my carry-on." The attendant nodded. "Of course. What do you need?" "There's a letter. It's from my mother." "It's in the side pocket, under the lining." The man in the blazer stood, reached into the overhead bin, pulled down my carry-on bag, and placed it gently on the seat beside me. He opened the front compartment carefully, lifting the lining as I instructed. And there it was, the letter, folded, neat, with a small piece of medical tape sealing it shut. He handed it to me, but I didn't open it. I looked at the people around me, at the phones still out, at the quiet, reverent hush that had settled in the cabin. And then I held the letter up. "Would you read it?" I asked the man. "I can't, not right now." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He broke the tape gently and unfolded the paper. There was a moment where he read silently, scanning the words, then, with a slow, measured breath, he began. "To whoever is reading this," he said, "my name is Gloria Kerner. If I'm gone and you're seeing this, it means something went wrong. My daughter, Marisol, is the one who has always stood by me. Vera has done things to manipulate, to mislead. I don't know what she'll say once I'm not around, but I need you to know, Marisol is the truth. She is my voice." He paused. "I know Vera will try to erase her, but I left proof." By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the row around me. The woman who had been filming lowered her phone. The elderly man behind me whispered, "That's love. That's a mother's love." Vera finally spoke. That's forged, she snapped, her voice cracking. No one turned to agree with her. I'm serious, she said again, louder this time. You all think she's innocent, but you don't know what she's done over the years. She always needs someone to save her. I stood up slowly. The plane dipped slightly, more turbulence, but I kept my feet steady. I don't need saving, I said. I needed air. I needed peace. You needed to win. You always wanted attention, she spat. Even when we were kids, you faked asthma attacks. You made Mom feel guilty. No, I interrupted. You made her feel guilty because she knew what you were, and she couldn't stop you. But I can. A few passengers began clapping softly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't raucous, but it was enough. The flight supervisor appeared at the front of the cabin, phone in hand, a headset in place. We've contacted legal, she announced. There will be airport security and airline representation waiting at the gate. We've pulled audio and video from the cabin. A younger man toward the front, likely mid-30s, turned his phone toward us. You've gone viral, he said. Over 100,000 people are watching this right now. Vera's face blanched. My mother had spoken. Her words had cut through all the years, the silencing, the character assassinations. And now, the truth wasn't just known, it was documented. And finally, believed. The moment the flight crew announced legal would be waiting at the gate, I felt something shift, not in the plane, but in the air between Vera and me. She went quiet, not because she had run out of words, but because she had finally realized she wasn't the one setting the tone anymore. For once, People were no longer whispering behind their hands. They were openly reacting, many of them glued to their phones, watching the live stream in real time. Every now and then, I caught pieces of what was being said on screen. She deserves justice. She's been trying to breathe, literally and figuratively. Someone please help her when they land. I'd always feared public attention. Growing up in Vera's shadow taught me to survive in the margins, to tiptoe around her moods, her accusations, her dominance. But right now, with the whole cabin witnessing my truth finally being heard, I felt stronger than I ever had. The seatbelt sign chimed. Overhead bins rattled with the soft rumble of descent. The plane began to dip slightly, a sharp reminder that we were still mid-air, still suspended between what had happened and what would come next. That's when the flight supervisor approached again. She knelt beside my seat, her voice low, firm, calm. Ms. Kerner, she said, do you feel unsafe with your sister remaining on board until landing? I took a breath. Not a shallow gasp. A real, full inhale. I feel unseen, I replied. But not anymore. The supervisor nodded like she understood more than what I said. Understood. Effective immediately, your sister is no longer recognized as a next of kin for any medical decisions on this flight. I've removed her from the passenger assistance log. From 2 rows up, I heard Vera scoff. The kind of breathy half-laugh she used when something didn't go her way, but she wanted to make it look like it didn't bother her. The supervisor added, We've also flagged the incident with corporate. If you'd prefer to disembark separately, we'll accommodate that. No, I said, meeting her eyes. I want to walk off this flight the same way I walked on, with my head up. She gave me a small, respectful nod and moved on. The hum of the engine deepened as we prepared for final descent. Somewhere near the front of the plane, a child asked, Mom, is the lady okay now? And I heard the mother respond softly, She's doing great, baby. She's doing really great. Vera hadn't moved. And she stayed seated, back rigid, arms folded, staring out the window like she was above all this. Like the plane descending around her didn't concern her at all. I stood, slowly, purposefully, walked up the aisle, not to start something, but to end it properly. She turned her head slightly when she noticed me beside her seat. Can't wait for applause when you step off, she said, tone flat, eyes sharp. I don't need applause, I said, but I do need you to hear this. She sighed, leaned back as if giving me permission. That's always been her way, pretend to grant what was never hers to allow in the first place. You think everything that happened on this flight was about pity, I continued. But it wasn't. It was about consequence. Yours. She narrowed her eyes. You'd be nothing without me. I made you. You were just a sickly kid with no voice, no spine. I nodded slightly, absorbing that like I had 100 times before. Then I met her gaze with a calm she didn't expect. You erased me so many times, I said. I learned how to write myself back in. Her lips parted, as if to respond, but nothing came out. I returned to my seat, just as the pilot's voice came overhead. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. The seatbelt sign lit up again. The familiar chime rang through the cabin. All around us, people began tidying up, putting away their trays, fastening belts, folding jackets. There was a different energy now. Not just the usual pre-landing stir. This was something else. Collective tension, anticipation, justice, inching closer. A voice from behind me spoke aloud, as if addressing the entire cabin. This woman doesn't just deserve a landing, the man said. She deserves recognition. There were murmurs of agreement. Someone clapped once, then again. Then a few more joined in. It didn't swell into a standing ovation, and I was grateful for that. This wasn't theater. This was real. I turned toward the window. Oakland's landscape was beginning to appear beneath the clouds. The grid of streets, the quiet glow of morning traffic, buildings still waking up to the day. A tear rolled down my cheek, not out of sadness or fear, but something I couldn't quite name. Maybe relief. Maybe the beginning of release. Beside me, Sarah, the young flight attendant, came by to check our seatbelts. She paused, leaned in close, and whispered so only I could hear. You did it. And I whispered back, not yet, but I'm close. She gave the smallest smile and continued down the aisle. I looked out the window again, watched the runway approach. And as we descended, I said it out loud, not to anyone in particular, not even to Vera, but to myself. I'm not suing for revenge. I'm suing because silence almost killed me. I stayed seated as the plane slowly rolled toward the gate, watching the ground crew through the small oval window. Everything moved in a calm, mechanical rhythm outside, like nothing extraordinary had happened in the last 2 hours. But inside, something irreversible had broken loose. I could feel it in the way people were looking at me now, not with pity, not with doubt, but something closer to respect, or maybe just recognition. As if, after everything, they finally saw me as someone real, someone who had fought to exist in full view. The moment the seatbelt sign blinked off, I didn't stand. I didn't need to be the first one off the plane. I wanted to be the last one to leave this story behind. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. The flight supervisor returned with a tablet in hand, tapping gently on my shoulder. Miss Kerner, we're ready to document your statement if you'd like to proceed. I nodded and took the stylus from her. My fingers didn't shake this time. I scrolled through the formal complaint. Endangerment, defamation, obstruction of medical access. Each word felt like an exhale. Every checkbox was a small reclamation of everything Vera had tried to deny me. Breath, credibility, dignity. I'd also like this to be part of the airline's internal report, I added. Not just an incident log. She nodded. It already is. I signed my name. Just as I was handing the tablet back, a voice floated through the aisle behind me, deep, warm, with a slight rasp. Young lady, it said, you fought with lungs and dignity. That's rare. I turned and met the eyes of an elderly black gentleman who had sat 3 rows behind me the entire flight. I'd barely noticed him during the chaos, but something about his presence now felt grounding. I didn't speak right away, just gave a small nod, pressing my lips together to stop them from trembling. Most folks panic or lash out when the world tries to silence them, he continued. You just stood your ground. You didn't scream. You didn't flinch. That takes more courage than most folks got. Thank you, I managed. He patted his chest. I got 3 daughters. I raised them to speak up. Watching you today made me feel like I did all right. It was the kind of compliment you can't buy, can't even ask for. It rooted something inside me. I hadn't expected kindness from strangers to be the thing that finally made me tear up, but there it was. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye as passengers began slowly standing, reaching for bags, preparing to disembark. Two TSA officers stood just outside the gate windows, flanked by an airline security manager. Behind them, a cluster of people with press badges waited, some already pointing cameras toward the plane. Vera stood too, slowly, cautiously. She was no longer straight-backed and poised. Her jaw was tight, her eyes darting from one face to another like she was trying to predict who would still believe her, who might defend her, who might walk away. I followed her with my eyes as she moved toward the front of the plane, glancing at her phone like it might offer some escape plan. She didn't speak to me. She didn't dare. The flight attendant opened the cabin door with a practiced pull, and the walkway tunnel sealed us back into the world of consequences. As Vera stepped onto the jet bridge, the cameras clicked. A reporter thrust a microphone toward her. "Ms. Aldridge, do you have anything to say about what happened on Flight 447? She paused, glanced over her shoulder, then spoke. "It was a misunderstanding," she said. "A family matter." Taken out of context. From behind her, a live stream replayed on a tablet screen held by one of the TSA agents the moment she grabbed the inhaler from my hand, followed by her yelling across the cabin. Context? It was all there. I stepped off the plane next. The flash of cameras greeted me too, but this time I didn't lower my eyes. I didn't hide behind my bag. Someone shouted, "Are you okay, Ms. Kerner?" I nodded. "I'm breathing. That's a start." Another reporter asked, "Do you plan to press charges?" "I already have," I said. Then, one final voice, someone from the back of the group, probably not a journalist, but someone watching all of it unfold, called out loud enough for everyone to hear. She thought power made her untouchable, but the truth always lands. The crowd murmured. I glanced once more toward Vera. Her face was unreadable. She was no longer playing a role. She was just caught in it. I was escorted down a separate hallway where a quiet corner had been set up for my formal statement. A female TSA officer offered me water and a place to sit. I took the water, declined the chair. "I'm not here to rest," I told her. "I'm here to make sure the next woman who gets silenced doesn't have to fight this hard to be heard." She nodded. "Take your time. We're with you." The words echoed long after she walked away. I knew there would be more to come. Interviews, paperwork, meetings with lawyers. There would be fallout, maybe even from within my family. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. The hardest part wasn't confronting Vera. It was surviving the years of her rewriting the world around me. And now, for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the pen. By the time I woke up the next morning, the world had already moved. My name was trending on social media, though I didn't check it myself. I didn't need to. Messages started pouring in through text and email, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some from complete strangers who had seen a woman stand up for her breath and her story on a flight that wasn't just about turbulence in the air. And yet, I felt no urge to celebrate. Instead, I dressed in the same navy blouse I wore to Mom's hospice meetings, tied my hair back like I used to when she needed me to read documents aloud, and walked 2 blocks from my aunt's house to the community center where her memorial had been moved after the church grew nervous about the cameras. They'd set up a quiet table at the front, covered in white cloth and flanked by framed photographs. One of Mom holding me as a toddler, one of her on her wedding day, one of her in her final months, still wearing lipstick and pearls. A small crowd had gathered. Some neighbors, a few cousins. My Aunt Louisa sat in the front row, hands folded, nodding toward me with that look only a woman who's lost both a sister and illusions can give. The room quieted as I stepped forward. I held the letter, the one we'd recovered from the lining of my carry-on, still smelling faintly of lavender and folded like Mom had touched it just yesterday. "If you're reading this," I began, voice trembling only once, "it means you survived what they tried to erase you for." A hush rippled through the room. I read each word slowly, deliberately. I didn't look up, not until I reached the last line. "I know Vera will try to erase you, but I left proof." By then, I didn't need to see who was crying. I just needed to finish. When I finally looked up, I saw Louisa wiping her cheeks, a teenager recording with a cracked iPhone, and 2 women near the exit clasping hands in silent solidarity. Vera wasn't there. I didn't expect her to be. She'd stepped down from her job that morning. Her employer had issued a statement about violations of ethical conduct. The airline followed suit shortly after, but the public didn't wait for institutions to speak. Within hours of landing, my inbox was filled with messages from women, teachers, nurses, caretakers, small-town lawyers, sharing their own stories, sisters who had been silenced, wives who had been called crazy, women who knew what it meant to lose oxygen, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, and be told it was their fault. "You gave us a voice," they wrote. What they didn't know was how much they gave me in return. Later that afternoon, I met Sarah at a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from Lake Merritt. She arrived with her badge still clipped to her tote bag, her hair pulled into a low bun, and a paper cup already sweating in her hand. "I don't usually do this," she said as she sat down. "But I didn't want you to think your voice disappeared the moment we landed." "It didn't," I said. "Because of you." She shook her head. "You didn't yell, but you made everyone listen." I took a breath, not because I needed one, but because I could. "Maybe power isn't volume," I said. "Maybe it's presence." She nodded slowly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded note. "This is for the official record," she said. "My statement. I emailed corporate too, but I wanted you to have it personally." I took it. Not for evidence, for peace. We didn't linger much longer. She had another flight to work. I had a walk to take. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon as I circled Lake Merritt. The breeze was warm, the kind that lifted your hair just enough to remind you that the world was moving forward, even if you weren't ready yet. I found a bench beneath an oak tree and sat down. The same one Mom used to stop at when she needed to rest on our afternoon strolls back when I visited her last spring. She'd always joke, "This is the only place in Oakland where you can hear your own thoughts and not someone else's opinions." She wasn't wrong. I pulled my inhaler from my bag and set it beside me on the bench, just for a moment, just to sit without gripping it like a lifeline. People passed me, some with dogs, some with earbuds, most with no idea who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I had nothing to prove to anyone anymore. But even as the quiet settled around me, I could feel a version of myself still lingering in the past. 11 years old. Sitting on Aunt Lucy's porch. Holding a glass of water I didn't ask for, my lungs tight, my throat burning with accusations I didn't understand. And even now, even after everything, part of me still sat there. I whispered to the wind, not expecting an answer. I got justice. But part of me is still 11, sitting on that porch, being called a thief. The leaves rustled above me like someone had heard. I reached for my inhaler, placed it back into my bag, and stood. I didn't need it anymore, not today. I walked along the lake's edge, one step at a time, heart steady. I survived, not to prove her wrong, but to become who I was before she made me invisible. Sometimes, survival isn't just about breath, it's about reclaiming the truth that's been taken from you piece by piece. Marisol didn't fight her sister with fists or fury. She fought with presence, with paper, and with her mother's final words. What would you do if someone in your family tried to erase your voice? Let us know in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true-life stories that reveal what people do when silence is no longer an option.